My name is Shirani Jayasuriya. I am the Communications and Outreach Manager with Ride New Orleans in New Orleans, Louisiana. Before I go into detail about my data project today, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about what Ride New Orleans does and why we do it. So, Ride New Orleans is a transit equity-focused advocacy organization. We center the needs and experiences of our transit riders here locally. We fight for reliable, frequent, and accessible transit for everybody in our region. Ride's vision is a New Orleans region in which taking transit by necessity or choice enables full access to jobs, education, healthcare, and other needs that ensure equitable, thriving communities that all the residents here deserve. Before I go into it, I'd like to give you a little lay of the land right now. New Orleans is experiencing a transit crisis. Pre-Hurricane Katrina, which was 2005, we had amazing transit. We had really world-class transit. We had nearly 300 buses on the line on any given day. Now, that is not the case. The buses all flooded during Katrina. We received some federal aid to replace them, but now almost 20 years later, our buses are ending the end of their useful life. There's also a mechanic shortage nationwide, so we're not able to get our broken buses fixed. COVID ridership really declined our numbers and the money we were making from the fare boxes. So right now, instead of having 300 buses on the line at any given time, we are lucky to have 80 buses on the line. So people who are used to waiting for a bus that comes every 10 minutes are now waiting sometimes an hour and a half in some cases. On top of that, our infrastructure is failing, our sidewalks are falling apart. Almost none of our bus stops have protective shelters, which is really rough when it was 112 degrees for like an entire month in August here, and when it rains 6 months out of the year. Unsurprisingly, Black and Brown communities, lower income communities, senior citizens and youth are the ones that suffer the most with these disparities. Many of our communities are being pushed farther outside of New Orleans into other parishes to find affordable housing. The lay of the land looks very different here than it did pre-Katrina, but our transit system has changed minimally. So we are definitely in crisis mode, and the data project that I created is hoping to give advocates a clear way to fight for transit funding, which we, as you heard, so desperately need. When I was thinking about the key stakeholders for this project, it was sort of funny. I was really insistent that my stakeholders were riders. We're a rider-centric organization, and everything we do is for the riders. So I'm like, no, this has to be for the riders, for the riders. But when I really stopped to think about it, our riders, me included, are so busy trying to get to and from work. It's a tourist industry. They're not working 9 to 5. They're working odd shifts. They're working late at night and in the weekends. They are not able to attend a 10 a.m. transit agency meeting. They're not able to always advocate for themselves the way that they would hope to. So our riders depend on advocates like us to amplify their needs when it comes to proper transit in the city. That's why our key stakeholders, turns out, they're in fact local organizations like Ride New Orleans, who advocate in transit adjacent spaces such as housing and renters' rights, youth services, crime prevention, environmental justice, workers' rights, and more. We are currently part of several committees of 30 plus local organizations, all fighting for the greater healthy community. What are we trying to accomplish? We are working together to convince city and state decision makers to fund resources that foster healthy and equitable communities, such as, in our case, better transit. Our stakeholders need to be able to present data and findings to decision makers in a way that results in sustainable funding. However, we all have very specific areas of expertise. We are transit experts, whereas our housing experts don't know much about transit. It's not the area that they've studied sometimes for years, but they still need transit data to convince decision makers about the larger community needs. And they don't always have access to that data, just like we don't always have access to the affordable housing data the way that we'd hope to. So how will this tool help stakeholders? How will this tool help stakeholders? I created an open data portal and dashboard for accessing transit and ridership data. My aim was to make this important data readily available for transparency and accountability. This will allow transit advocates and organizers alike in intersectional fields the ability to quickly download and share the data they need for their own campaigns and projects. This is specifically important because, at least for RIDE, we are the only organization in New Orleans and probably the state as a whole, and possibly even the national region doing this type of work. There are no other transit advocacy groups in our area doing this work, and a lot of our data is proprietary to us. We created it. It lives in our databases right now and isn't readily available. Something that we say a lot in local organizing here is that we can't do this work in a silo. And I think that our organization and a lot of the organizations we work with are struggling with this because we all do our own data work and it doesn't always get shared out to groups. So I'm hoping with this project to change that. What do our stakeholders need when it comes to data? They need data that completely centers the most vulnerable transit riders in our area. They need data to be city and regional based, disaggregated by race, income, and location whenever possible. They need it to be clear and easy to understand, and it must be up to date, and the recommendations must be easy to find and compelling. It's super important that this data is easy to grab and go, can be quickly printed out. They can get a one-pager just by pressing print and bringing it down to City Hall, for instance. So all of this stuff is really, it needs to be usable for everyone, not just transit experts. Here is a screenshot of my main data project. You can see here a map of the greater New Orleans region. And this is going to be an access to jobs map by how many jobs in the New Orleans region are accessible in certain areas of town within 60 minutes by transit. And you'll see here on the left-hand side, this data is for 2023, the current data. But if you swipe it, you're going to see the data for 10 years out based on proper transit funding. So you'll be able to see that change over a decade. The map was made in ArcGIS story maps. Users can also hover over individual neighborhoods to see, based on census data, transit reliance, annual income, population by race, age, and more. The data can also be broken down by parish or council district. Those metrics are super important when vying for funding at a city or state level. People want to know specifically how people in their council, the council members want to know how people in their council district are affected so that they can advocate for them properly. And then the color contrast here makes it really easy to see who has access and who doesn't. When you're looking at that really, really big light yellow and light green area, that's all folks that have minimal transit access. They're accessing 5% of our region's jobs, 10% at best. So we have a lot of work to do, and transit funding can change these stats dramatically for us. Let's see what else. The second big part of this data project is the New Orleans Transit Equity Database. This is a screenshot of the main landing page, and it will be a one-stop shop for updated transit data and information. I've separated it by the most common genres. These are the genres that people are most likely to ask us for, other advocacy groups are most likely to ask us for information from, including access to jobs, like I just showed you. Bus stop data, we're currently doing a large bus stop inventory to push for better shelters at our many stops. Like I said, most of them don't have shelters at all. GTFS feeds, land use, miscellaneous, there'll be one pagers in there. I'm still getting all of that together. Users can quickly tap on each tab. They don't need to know a whole lot about the data to retrieve it. There will be easy explanations in each tab so that they don't have to worry about what the data means. They can just grab it and they can go and do their campaigns. Some considerations that I had to keep in mind while putting this together. It needed to be easy to share. The data needed to be available to export and download and print so that anyone could use it. It also had to be easy to update. Our long-term goal is to have these other organizations that we work with, hopefully all 30 of them, update their data into this website as well. So it ends up becoming, instead of just an equitable transit data hub, it'll be a healthy communities hub with all of the data pointers that lead to positive outcomes. So you'll have the housing data there, you'll have the crime prevention data, the youth services data, all in one place for advocates far and wide to use. Another thing that I really had to watch for was that the language in our tools was super accessible. I know that I'm in communication, so sometimes I like to write pages and pages where one sentence might suffice. Keeping language accessible so that I can easily translate it into Spanish, Vietnamese, or Haitian Creole, some of the languages that many folks who English is not their first language here are speaking. What else do we have? How will this data be used? The data will be shared with the advocates I mentioned. It will be used for numerous campaigns across organizations. It'll be really, really important during the New Orleans budget season. This is when we have a lot, and the state budget season. This is when we have a lot of work to do to convince decision makers of the need for transit funding and the need for equitable transportation in our area and beyond. The tool will be updated quarterly as part of RIDE's work rubric, at least for now as we're getting it started. This might change as more organizations come on board. Some key learnings and reflections. Even the most comprehensive data in the world is useless to your audience if it's not displayed properly. That's something that I struggled with for a long time because I'd find all this awesome data, or RIDE has all this very specific awesome data, but it doesn't mean anything if you just hand somebody 10 pages of spreadsheets. They need to see compelling visuals. And before I started this fellowship, I did not know how to use any programs to create those compelling visuals. So that was always a huge barrier for me. And now I have more tools in my toolbox to help me with that. Identifying your stakeholders is essential. I also mentioned that I was confused and on the fence about who my stakeholders were, but once it became obvious who they were, the rest of the project sort of fell into place. It's worth giving that some thought because it might not always be the people who you think it is. And then also you must keep equity at the forefront of everything you do in projects like this. Some of my personal challenges: learning new programs. Tableau is still not my friend. Honestly, ArcGIS isn't either. I needed to practice, and ask for a lot of help. I wouldn't have been able to do it without the help of the folks in the fellowship and the mentors, and as well as my own policy director at RIDE, who really walked me through it. Also, finding the specific data you need, looking through multiple sources. If you don't find it in the census, look at the equity. Look at several places before you decide that it doesn't exist, because it probably does. It's probably just hidden. And you have to know how to look for it and to look in multiple places. And then lastly, stop assuming you're not a data person. Going into this, my talk track was, I'm Shirani, I'm not a data person. Don't ask me about data. Don't ask me about numbers. Don't ask me about graphs. But now I can say, at least somewhat, I am a data person.